Northern China. A desert so deadly they call it the Sea of Death. 337,000 square kilometers where nothing survives. Then China did something impossible. They planted hundreds of millions of trees. Built a 4,500-kilometer forest wall. Turned sunlight into water in the middle of nowhere. Entire cities that choked on dust for 80 days a year can now breathe. Lands declared dead are coming back to life. This is the Green Great Wall. And it's rewriting the rules of what humans can do. The invisible enemy. Let me paint you a picture of what life was like in northern China before any of this started. Imagine waking up in Beijing. You look outside your window and the sky is orange. Not sunrise orange, dust orange. The kind of thick, choking haze that turns day into twilight. You check your phone. Another sandstorm warning. The third one this week. You put on a mask not for a pandemic, but because breathing the air outside is like inhaling ground glass. Fine particles of desert sand, carried hundreds of kilometers by monsoon winds, now coating every surface in the city. This wasn't occasional. This was life. In the 1990s, Beijing residents wore masks for more than 80 days per year. 80 days. That's over 2 months of your life spent unable to breathe your own city's air because of sand from deserts you'd never even visited. The culprit. 2 massive deserts in northern China, the Gobi and the Taklamakan. The Taklamakan Desert is particularly brutal. The name itself translates roughly to go in and you won't come out, or the place of no return. That should tell you everything you need to know. This desert was formed millions of years ago through a perfect storm of geographical bad luck. The Tian Shan Mountains to the north and the Kunlun Mountains to the south created a barrier that blocked nearly all moisture from the Indian Ocean and Siberia. The basin between them became a vast, arid wasteland, 337,000 square kilometers of sand, heat, and death. How dry is it? Average rainfall is less than 100 millimeters per year. That's almost 10 times less than California, and California is already known for being dry. Put another way, every square meter of Taklamakan receives about the same amount of water as a single 500 milliliter water bottle per week. Try keeping anything alive on that. Summer temperatures soar above 40 degrees Celsius. Winter temperatures plunge below -20. Sandstorms strike without warning, without mercy, burying everything in their path. But here's where human activity made everything worse. Deforestation stripped away what little vegetation existed on the desert's edges. Overgrazing by livestock destroyed ground cover that held soil in place. Excessive groundwater extraction drained aquifers that sustained oasis communities. The result? Desertification, the process of fertile land turning into desert, began spreading like a slow-motion plague across northern China. Villages were abandoned as sand swallowed them whole. Agricultural land became worthless. Major cities hundreds of kilometers away choked on dust storms that seemed to grow worse every year. By the late 1970s, China faced a choice: fight back or watch the desert consume everything. They chose to fight. The Green Great Wall. In 1978, the Chinese government announced something that sounded completely insane. They were going to build a wall. Not a wall of stone like the Great Wall of China. A wall of trees. A living barrier stretching 4,500 kilometers across the entire northern part of the country. They called it the Three North Shelter Belt Program. The world calls it the Green Great Wall. The goal was almost incomprehensibly ambitious: plant 35 million hectares of new forest by 2050. Increase China's forest coverage from just 10% in 1949 to over 25%. This wasn't a single forest. It was a vast network of thousands of forests, windbreak belts, and ecological restoration zones covering nearly all of northern China, from Xinjiang in the west to Heilongjiang province in the east. It is considered the largest human-made ecological project ever attempted on land. Not built with concrete or steel, but with determination, science, and the green of life itself. Think about the scale for a moment. 4,500 kilometers. That's roughly the distance from New York to London. Except instead of crossing an ocean, you're crossing deserts, mountains, grasslands, and plateaus, some of the most hostile terrain on Earth. And you're not just crossing it. You're transforming it. The skeptics were everywhere. International experts called it impossible. Even within China, many doubted whether trees could survive in such extreme conditions. The desert had defeated every civilization that tried to tame it for thousands of years. What made modern China think they could succeed? But China had something previous civilizations didn't: modern science, coordinated government effort, and a deadline measured in decades rather than years. They weren't trying to transform the desert overnight. They were playing the long game, a 72-year project spanning generations. And they started with something surprisingly low-tech: straw. The checkerboard solution. Here's where Chinese engineering gets creative. You can't just plant trees in shifting sand dunes. The sand moves constantly. Wind reshapes the entire landscape. A seedling planted today could be buried under 3 feet of sand tomorrow, or exposed with its roots dangling in the air. So Chinese engineers came up with a brilliantly simple solution: create a checkerboard. Using satellite mapping and drones, they surveyed the terrain across the Taklamakan, analyzing dune movement patterns and wind direction. Based on that data, they designed a massive grid system using straw. From above, it looks exactly like a giant checkerboard laid across golden sand. Each square is roughly 20 by 20 feet, created by laying bundles of straw in geometric patterns across the dunes. Sounds simple, right? It's not. Millions of pounds of straw have to be transported hundreds of miles into the heart of the desert, where vehicles sink into soft sand and paved roads don't exist. Teams of workers dig shallow trenches and place bundles of straw into precise grid lines. And they do this in temperatures exceeding 49 degrees Celsius, with no shade, no relief, just brutal, relentless heat. Thousands of Chinese workers persist in these conditions. Why? Because each grid of straw is more than just a barrier, it's the foundation for life to return. The woven pattern stabilizes the shifting dunes. It slows the wind. It creates microzones where moisture can linger long enough for planting to begin. Once the grid is in place, mechanical augers and planting machines move in. These machines drill small holes at the center of each square, preparing the soil for drought-resistant species: saxaul, desert poplar, red willow. The seedlings are carefully nurtured in nurseries before being brought to the desert. Each one is positioned with precision so its fragile roots settle just below the surface, where the straw layer shields them from the scorching sun and shifting sand. Workers add measured amounts of water, not too much, not too little, and compact the soil around the base to ensure the roots make full contact with the moist layer beneath. As weeks pass, something remarkable happens. The protective grid continues serving its purpose. The straw keeps the surface cooler, reduces evaporation, prevents fine sand from eroding around the seedlings. Over time, the straw gradually decomposes through wind, dew, and microorganisms, turning into an organic blanket rich in nutrients. This natural fertilizer feeds the developing root systems, helping them extend deeper into stable soil layers below. What began as a few fragile seedlings slowly evolves into a living network of vegetation, a green framework that anchors the dunes and begins the long process of reclaiming the desert. It's working. Slowly, methodically, square by square, the desert is being tamed. But straw grids and tree planting are just the beginning. China's next move was even more ambitious. Let the sun grow the forest. Here's a wild question. What if you could use the desert's greatest weapon, its brutal, relentless sunshine, as your greatest tool? The Taklamakan receives over 2,700 hours of sunlight each year, ranking among the world's highest in solar radiation. That's a lot of free energy just beating down on empty sand. China's solution? Turn sunlight into water. Along the Tarim Desert Highway, which stretches more than 436 kilometers straight through the heart of the Taklamakan, Chinese engineers installed 86 solar-powered pumping stations. Each station hosts hundreds of photovoltaic panels that generate electricity to pump groundwater from depths exceeding 100 meters. The water flows through an underground pipeline network and is distributed via drip irrigation, enabling more than 200,000 trees along the highway to survive in an area that sees almost no rainfall. Think about that. A highway running through one of the driest places on Earth, lined with living trees, powered entirely by the sun. The Tarim Highway has become the world's first carbon-free desert expressway, a place where sunlight generates electricity, electricity produces water, and water sustains life. But China didn't stop there. To optimize space in their solar farms, they elevated the panels about 2 meters above the ground, allowing air to circulate freely and plants to grow beneath them. The shaded soil beneath the panels retains more moisture and stays cooler, supporting species like licorice, red willow, and hawthorn. These form natural green zones under an artificial canopy of solar panels. It's almost poetic. The thing that makes the desert deadly endless, scorching sunlight, is now the thing bringing it back to life. In some installations, thousands of heliostat mirrors are arranged in wide arcs, each rotating on 2 axes to follow the sun's path across the sky. The reflected light concentrates onto a central tower, where molten salt is heated to more than 540 degrees Celsius. That heat produces high-pressure steam, which drives turbines and generators to produce electricity. The excess heat is stored in molten salt tanks, allowing the plant to keep generating power steadily at night or during cloudy weather. Building and operating a 50-megawatt solar power tower in the Taklamakan costs around $130 million. Not cheap, but the returns are enormous. Clean energy, water for irrigation, jobs for local communities, and a scalable model for desert reclamation worldwide. The Taklamakan, once known as the Sea of Death, is becoming one of the world's largest ecological laboratories, where sunlight, technology, and human perseverance converge. From what was once seen as a hostile force, humanity has learned to turn sunlight into water and sand into forest. Building a highway through hell. Now, all these solar panels and tree grids don't mean much if you can't access them. You need infrastructure. You need roads. Enter the Tarim Desert Highway, one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects in western China. Built to connect the oasis cities of Luntai and Minfeng, this highway cuts straight through the heart of the Taklamakan for over 300 kilometers. Not around the desert. Not skirting the edges. Straight through the middle. Construction started in 1993. The highway officially opened on October 4, 1995, after just over 2 years of work under absolutely brutal conditions, shifting dunes, sandstorms, and temperatures exceeding 50 degrees Celsius. The project cost around 1.75 billion yuan, roughly $260 million. Beneath the asphalt lies a complex foundation of gravel, straw mats, and geotextiles designed to keep the sand from swallowing the road. Because sand doesn't just sit there. It moves. It shifts. It tries to reclaim everything. Engineers had to account for dune migration patterns, wind erosion, and temperature extremes that would crack inferior materials. The road had to be flexible enough to handle thermal expansion but strong enough to support heavy truck traffic. Today, this desert highway links remote solar farms, research stations, and newly greened areas. But it also serves another purpose: tourism. The desert as destination. Yes, you read that right. Tourism. In the Taklamakan Desert. Planting forests, stabilizing sand, and harnessing solar energy. Please like and subscribe channel.